welcome to another 31 Days of Horror 2014 update regarding Toronto After Dark Film Festival. Festival's almost over, but I've got some movies to talk about today. The first one is one that I'm going to come right off and say is my pick for the best movie of the festival. If you're a fan of slasher films, this is something that if you can see it in theaters, like hands down. But if not, as soon as it comes out, release day, it's a day one pickup, guys. This isn't one of those, it's beyond a direct-to-video, made-for-TV type, that stuff that we've been getting lately. It's so much better than that. Well, what movie is it? That's what you want to know, right? It's The Town That Dreaded Sundown 2014. 2014 isn't in the title, but to distinguish it from the original The Town That Dreaded Sundown, throw that in there, right? And I know what you're thinking. Oh no, not another sequel, not another remake. No, not another. In fact, it is a sequel. Yes, it is a remake. What? Yeah, I know, you heard me. It is a very meta, I call it a meta sequel. It takes place in the town where the original, because The Town That Dreaded Sundown is based on, is a movie dealing with real life events, so it's based on a true story. This Town That Dreaded Sundown is based on the true story, based on the movie. Essentially what it is, I'll have to explain the movie itself. It's essentially, it's sort of like, I think it's like 65 years or so after the original murder happened. Every year, they go and on the anniversary, after the film had been made, they show the film, and they show it all over the place, right? Well, the movie is fictional, in a sense. A lot of what happens in that film is taken directly from the real events. So, in this meta sequel, the killings start happening again, and they reference scenes from the movie to play out this rehashing, but it's not a remake, because this is after the movie. The movie's actually, way in the past, and the murders were even further in the past. This is new killings in the same town where the film was from, what the film is about, referencing all the things. And essentially, you got the high school girl who's been targeted, and she's trying to figure it out. So she's digging into not only the movies past, but the actual historical events past, and she's going through news clippings and talking to people and doing all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very meta, very, very meta, very, very good, and so it's just awesome, considering that this was such apparently a short shoot, considering it looks gorgeous, and the amount of stuff they pull out, they pull out archive footage from that particular, that area, that town. I'm guessing it's archive footage, because if they managed to put together a reshoot of stuff and make it look like it's old footage in the short amount of time that they had to make this movie, either way, kudos to the filmmakers, because whether you did it new and made it look old, or if you found old and then it transitions into the new, either way, that awesome. It's directed by Alfonso Gomez-Rejon, or Rejon, however you want to say it, who hasn't really done much in terms of film, but he will, well, if you follow the directors of television. American Horror Story, guys, he's directed like 12 episodes, and not from, a single season or anything, but over multiple years. Right from, I think, might have been the first episode. So he brings a lot of, I guess, his skills shooting television and stuff like that really translated over into being able to pump out this hour and a half long film that's very, very creative. Cinematography's great, camera stuff that's going on with the camera and the angles and the old footage and the new footage and the film footage and the real life story and such. It's amazing. In fact, while shooting the film, they came to find out that the son of the guy who directed the original film still like lived in that town now, and so they tracked him down, even just to talk, just because they're making this movie and stuff like that. But they ended up putting him in the movie, writing a part for him and all this kind of stuff, and putting him into the movie and putting him into the story, and it just amazing that they were able to add that in there. It gives such a sense of realism to this film. In terms of actors, it's a weird cast, actually. It's got a handful of people who are older and have been in a lot of stuff, and then it's got a bunch of people who are younger and been in pretty much nothing. Starting off with Ed Lauter. He's been in so much. The Magnificent Seven Ride. He was in The Last Action Hero, not the new one, the old one from like the 70s. Yeah, you gotta specify that, right? French Connection 2. He's in the 1976 King Kong remake as Carnahan, most likely known from possibly Cujo and Death Wish 3. He was in that. Yeah, Revenge of the Nerds 2. I remember him in that one. Born on the 4th of July. He was the Legion Commander in that one. Mulholland Falls. He was Earl. Probably Python. That made-for-TV or direct-to-video movie about the snake. I think that was the last thing I saw him in. Next person up would be Veronica Cartwright. Yes, Veronica Cartwright, who, she's been in tons of stuff. Alfred Hitchcock got his hands on her. She was Kathy Brenner in The Birds. She was in the old 1960s Daniel Boone television series as Jemima Boone. So if you were big into that, you'd probably know her from there. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Alien is probably where most of you know her from. She was Lambert. She was in The Nightmares. I think it's an anthology movie. The Right Stuff. Flight of the Navigator. Witches of Eastwick. Mirror Mirror 2. The sequel to that Mirror Mirror. Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh. Seeing as how I've just been watching it a lot, if you are into the X-Files, I believe it's season 5 or 4 or 5. She played Agent Spender's mother, Cassandra Spender. Yeah, and in terms of recent, she's been doing a lot of stuff. Scary Movie 2, she was in. Eastwick, the new television series. They brought her in to play Bun Waverly. Next up, another person you probably know, Gary Cole. A lot of stuff, a lot of early, 80s, well, late 80s, I guess. Late 80s television. From Midnight Caller, if you know that. He was Jack Nighthawk Killian. He played Mike Brady in the Brady Bunch movie from the 90s. He was Sheriff Lucas Buck from American Gothic. But where you're going to know Gary Cole mostly from, outside of, there's a couple of things. For those of you who are into comedies, he is Bill Lumberg from Office Space. That's right. You need those TPS reports. He's also Captain Matthew Gideon from Crusade. If you watched Crusade, you would definitely know him from that. But he's been lately doing a lot of voice acting and small things. He's Harvey Birdman, Kim Possible, Penguins of Madagascar, the TV series, Scooby-Doo, the Mysteries Incorporated, the new one, Archer, Family Guy, Bob's Burgers. Yeah, he's doing a lot of voice acting these days. So then you get people like Anthony Anders, who you'll know him to see him. The name may not ring any bell. You probably know him early on from Romeo Must Die, or Big Mama's House, or Me, Myself, and Irene, Urban Legends Final Cut, Exit Wounds, Barbershop, Scary Movie 3, Scary Movie 4. Lately, he was in Transformers as Glenn Whitman. Law and Order, for those of you who watch that series, he was Detective Kevin Bernard. And then you get people like Addison Timlin, who's gorgeous girl, but really hasn't done anything. Or Joshua Leonard, who, lots of little small parts, was in Numbers, you know, the television series, and CSI Miami, just like a lot of people, you know, just little bits and pieces here and there. But in terms of small part, like Men of Honor, oh my gosh, I can't even talk today. The Shaggy Dog, he was in that. In terms of recent work outside of this movie, you're mostly probably going to know him from Shark Night 3D, if you managed to catch that. He was Red. But yeah, it's just one of those things where the film pulls enough people together, both old and new. They come together, and you know what? I'm not going to say the acting is great, because it didn't need to be. It was above adequate, and as a result, really pulls together such a fantastic movie. Aaron Pinn, I'm serious. Listen to me when I say The Town That Dreaded Sundown. That's something you're gonna have to, and I'm not talking about the original. This remake is something that you're gonna have to track down and watch, because I know for a fact that this is gonna be something that you will enjoy, because it's just it pays homage to the classics at the same time as being very fresh. And I think that's part of the problem with the slasher genre. We've seen most of it before. There isn't anything new going on. And while I won't say, you know, I will say that the end of this film isn't much, you know, when you saw the Scream films as they went along, it's got that type of an ending to the film at the end. But up until that point, you're just watching it between like I said, the camera work and the lighting, and the fact, you know, the tribute to the old movie as well as the new, just brings it all together. And honestly, it was refreshing. And as much as I had Housebound was my favorite movie up until this point. The Town That Dreaded Sundown kicked it out like that. I had no problems coming out. Literally, the look on my face when, you know, it came out, and there's all my you know, my critic friends and bloggers and such, and they all, you know, they're all nodding their head, and they see my face going, you know, wow, that was good, that was entertaining. A lot of them were just, yeah, I will agree with you. Now, there are some of them who didn't put it as high as I did. They had other favorites. That's okay. Everybody can have their own favorites, but I think we all agreed that in terms of quality and entertainment value, The Town That Dreaded Sundown was good. And I mean, there's a lot of people who came out to watch this that aren't uber horror fans. They like a good horror movie, and you know what? This they all said this was a good horror movie. This was a good slasher. This was a good meta sequel. So check it out. But let's move on to the next movie. Okay. Next up on the bill is a documentary, Canadian film called Why Horror? Yeah, what's there to say? It's directed by essentially two people. There's Nicholas Kleinman, who hasn't really done a lot, but has been in the film industry or television film industry for a while, editing the Canadian show Royal Canadian Air Force, oddly enough. And then the other one, was Rob Lindsay, who, again, same type of thing, director, editor on Royal Canadian Air Force. So they had their connections, and that's obviously that's how they knew each other. And they pulled on a gentleman, I'm guessing was their friend or something like that, Tal Zimmerman. And essentially what this is, why horror? On its surface, and most people will describe it just from the name, right? Why horror? You think of it as a look into why we as a people enjoy horror movies. And that's the way I looked at it going in. That's the way I thought the movie was going to be. And in my mind, I already had this as a low point. A, because it's a documentary. I'm not really big into documentary. And two, it's a documentary on why we love horror. I'm sorry, but if you've been watching any supplemental materials on DVDs, horrors, documentaries, interview footage with any of the great... The why horror question has been answered so many times. And I mean, you look at people like George Romero. He's probably answered that question from like 1960s up until now every year. And he gives the same answer pretty much every time. So at least you can say that about a guy. He hasn't changed his mind. But really, Why Horror is more about Tal Zimmerman. Actually, it's more about the story of Tal Zimmerman and why he got into horror. Even though a lot of the footage, though he's, the camera's following him around and he's doing a lot of, the interviews and all that kind of stuff, a lot of the footage is just interview footage with, name people from the horror genre. It's more about Tal. Now, and here's the thing. When it's talking about Tal and talking about Tal as a kid and Tal growing up and talking with Tal's family and what Tal did and such like that, I kind of enjoyed that. And the reason why I say that, because I'm not normally one to say I enjoy just watching somebody's life type thing. I'm not really into that. But Tal, and he got me right from the get-go, talked about, yes, it talked about his childhood growing up and how he's more into horror than I am. But he got into the horror scene in Toronto like I did because of the Rue Morgue Cinema Macabre movie nights. Way back when we were at, what was it, the Vatican, which was a nightclub, and they showed movies there. I used to drive in from another city to go to those things just to see these movies. Where else was I going to see the original Pink Brothers, The Eye? I'm not going to see that in theaters. They had it at the Rue Morgue Cinema Macabre night, and I could drink beer. And Tal Zimmerman's about my age. So it's funny that I don't know him personally, even though he's been going to the same events and same things that I've been going to for almost as long as I've been going to them. Which is so odd, considering how small some of these events are. But yeah, he goes on and he talks to people like, obviously the Rue Morgue guys, Chris Alexander, who, started off at Rue Morgue and is now the editor at Fangoria. Talks to Rodrigo Godinho, who was, from Rue Morgue, came out of Rue Morgue. Talks to Eli Roth, George Romero, John Carpenter, Shinji Mikami, Takashi Shimizu, Jen Soska, the Soska twins, just a whole bunch of people. A lot of them he managed to get interviews with from going to Fan Expo, which that I go to. Other ones he actually used some of the budget obviously that he got to travel the world. So how he got into interview Takashi Shimizu was by going to Japan and such. And so they interviewed different people, and I'm trying to think, Dave Alexander was also on there, Gary Pullen. Dave Alexander's the editor at Rue Morgue now. Gary Pullen's the artist who does the covers for Rue Morgue, and he does, if you're into collecting records right now, a lot of those horror records that you're picking up, whether it be on Record Day or something, he's done a lot of the covers to those, and other things like that. He's a really good artist and a really good guy too. But yeah, it's a lot of interview footage with all these people and talking about why horror is what it is. Some of them are more passionate about their explanations than others. And he also, which was nice, though it was pointless, he went to labs and tested, he went to, I guess got CAT scanned or something like that while watching horror movies to see how his brain reacted to horror movies, and went to I think it was a university or something where they were doing tests on reaction and electric impulses and stuff like that, and have him and his mom watching a horror movie, and she's freaking out and he's just loving it. Really, none of these tests meant anything because it was just, they showed, whatever. They must have been hoping that they would have gotten some kind of footage that would have worked in the documentary, but really what they got was footage that really was completely inconclusive. I don't know that this documentary would, especially for people in the States, I don't know that it would hit home with you as much as it did with me, simply because it is very homegrown. There's a lot of people in the film that I know who they are. I've talked to them, I've, gone to their events, I've, drank with them, whatever. And that being said, at the same time, you might, like me, enjoy the fact that, hey, here's another guy who's into horror and just, like watching a fan. The one thing I will say that I wasn't too appreciative of in the film was, I guess via the footage that they got, it kind of went in a different direction than I think they intended. They wanted to explain, find out why they liked horror, or why Tal enjoyed horror, but because it seemed to, like Tal's big thing was he managed to find people who enjoyed the same things he did, which he didn't really have growing up. And of course, it's, things have changed in the last 20 years, guys. You can find those groups, right? You can find your anime lovers. Well, you know what? I didn't have anime. I knew maybe 3 or 4 people growing up who were big into anime, outside of what you saw on Saturday morning cartoons. Horror films, I didn't know anybody growing up. It was me and my dad, and we watched them, and we loved them. Yeah, he was saying, he got into the thing that these Rue Morgue nights, when he went to them, he was like, oh my god, there are people who like this stuff as much as I do. And it started, the film turned into more of a not so much why we like horror, even though that was still there, but it was almost like a justification to people who aren't into horror or have never even really watched horror movies and dismiss it outright without even giving it a chance, or consider people who are into horror movies deviants of some sort, which really isn't the case these days. I mean, back then maybe, but now no, horror is very, very mainstream, right? And as such, I think the film plays more to, and this is a weird thing, it plays better to somebody who's not into horror films, because essentially the message is to them rather than to a fan like myself, because they didn't say anything in the film I didn't already know, for one thing. So it's not for horror fans. I don't really need to feel justified in my like of horror, because I know there are other people who like horror, and if they don't, I don't care. And then there's that whole thing. Why do we like horror? I have to justify it to you. Guess what? More people like horror now than ever before, and it's mainstream. It's not just a Halloween type thing. There's horror movies all year round, and with DVD and all that kind of stuff. And toys. There's horror everywhere. You can get it in the Toys R Us. You can get it. Like, horror is part of everyday culture, right? So there's no real need to justify it to some people, but for those who are still on the fence and still think horror is a little, evil, this would be geared to them. If, and here's the big if, it weren't for one big problem. As is commonplace with documentaries, documentaries about movies, they like to put movie footage in the film, which wouldn't be a problem. If you're doing, think about horror and you're trying to get it to those who aren't well versed in the genre, those who are against the genre, and those who are maybe misguided and misplaced about the genre, you would try and ease them into it. You might show stuff from the Birds, the Universal Monsters, the Hammer horror films, keep it light, fair. You might even get some cartoons in there. You might do some wacky, more comedy stuff. The things you're not gonna want to show them: nudity, like hard nudity, even light nudity you probably want to cut out. Gore, extreme gore, and super extreme gore, probably not what you want, because you don't want to be sitting there watching a scene where, hey, maybe it's Tal and his mom talking about, oh my god, the first time, he decided to do a makeup effects to his face, and then next thing you know, and he's like, yeah, I tried to, imitate something from a movie I saw. And, for example, they might put up a big shot of some, I don't know, maybe a zombie from whatever. It could be one of the Dawn of the Dead movie or full cheese zombie movie. Like constantly it's like boom, and they're not very long sometimes, but it could be like 10-15 seconds of just the gore shots. Like the money shots from films are just interspersed throughout this film, and I'm like, okay, I enjoyed it. In fact, they were probably what I enjoyed most about the movie, but I'm curious. It's almost like they didn't know what they were trying to achieve with this film. Was it to find out why you liked horror? Was it to find out why people like horror? Was it to justify why you like horror? Was it to get people converted into being horror fans? Was it to please horror fans? Was it a movie made for horror fans, or was it a movie made for non-horror fans? And I think that's one of the problems. They had a lot of stuff and they wanted to do a lot of things, but they weren't on point. I don't think they were on point, and that's one of the problems with the film. And I guess it's a common problem with documentaries, actually. It's hard to stay on point and on focus when you're just shooting, whatever you can get, and then culminating it back into a movie. And yeah, that's why horror ain't doing it. No, it's a pass, guys. Don't even bother with it. If you have somebody who might be on the fence about getting into horror films, and is a kind of a fanboy of sorts, maybe they're into fantasy movies or Harry Potter type stuff, and they're kind of dabbling with putting their feet in the water of horror, and they don't have a problem with gore and being scared and nudity and violence and stuff like that, then you know what, maybe showing them why horror would be something to do. But honestly, if you see it and it comes up on your whatever video on demand, red box, whatever, I honestly, in my opinion, it's a pass. It really is a pass. It doesn't tread any new ground in any reasonable fashion. Had they gone with the testing and the aspects of the scientific experiments, had they been long time running and gone into those more with some actual conclusive something, then I would say maybe this would be interesting, because that would give you some kind of a justification or something like that. But no, this is just a bunch of people's opinions for the most part, a lot of which has been seen elsewhere, interspersed with a fanboy and his life story of how he got into genre, how he got into horror. And if it isn't good enough for me, considering everybody, this is from where I am. This is it. It's almost my life, almost, and it probably isn't going to be working for you one iota. Anyways, guys, I think there is one more night of Toronto After Dark. 2 movies. It's going to be broken up. I'm almost positive going to be broken up into 2 videos to go, and then it's over. So, ends on the 24th. Got until the 31st to manage to hit 31, and I've counted, and I don't have enough. Oddly enough, I don't have enough with this festival to hit 31. So I believe I need to watch at least one more movie to be able to make my 31 movies in 31 days. So there will be videos after the Toronto After Dark footage. So stay tuned. We're not done yet. Till next video, guys. Take care. Have a good one. Sweet dreams.